Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
All right, huge hospitality mates, welcome to, I can't believe this, Daniel Clifford.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good actually, yeah, it's good.
Good.
It's a tough time of year, but it's, I'm very happy with how we're performing, so it's good.
Right, okay, tough time of year?
I think that, today's the budget, isn't it?
So yes, so it is, I forgot about that.
That's going to make a big difference to all of us. I think the hospitality industry it's completely changed since COVID.
Yeah.
And we're fighting, and, I enjoy the fight, so it's good, yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, because you're right, it has changed immeasurably since.
Yes,
COVID.
I think for me personally, we came out of COVID, we were all raring to go. The restaurant was full. It was a time that we've never experienced as a restaurant before, where we were full for lunch and dinner every single day. And then it's strange that October happened where the budgets changed, and it changed the business model overnight.
Yeah.
And bookings went down, staffing costs went up, and suddenly you become a juggler, and you're like, okay, the glory days are over. Let's stay open. And my goal has always been to push forward and never go backwards.
Yeah.
I believe that we do that. I believe that we do that on a daily basis. But it's getting more and more difficult to do that because the way that the business is set up and the way that we operate 4 days a week. We do that for staff retention. That's the biggest thing because no one wants to work the hours anymore. I think the industry has completely changed. I think we've tried what used to be an industry that became your life. Now life is a more important part than your job. And I think that's the social change that's changed dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's a damn good point because I think that's exactly what's happened in the sense that I was just talking to somebody the other day around the concept of work-life balance, right? Everybody is looking for that. But actually I'm speaking to more and more people who are getting frustrated by that term.
I'm not frustrated by it. I've dedicated my life since the age of 15 to this industry, and this industry has been very kind to me. The hard work I've done, and look, I've done 120 hours a week. It's been done in the past. It was done. I did it for other people. I've done it for myself. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's what it took to get the business where it is today. And I think the way the government and the way that we're being told how to operate, and there's so many more laws, so many more differences. We didn't have social media 20 years ago. That's a cost now to a business. We didn't have all the rules and regulations. I'm not saying we don't need them. I'm saying that everything is a cost, and that is a cost to a business that already runs at such a high percentage with my staff. My staff are my biggest cost. They always have been. But now the food prices have gone up. The electricity prices have gone up. It's not me complaining. It's just me saying that at the end of the day profit is not a dirty word. Profit is a word that if you don't make profit, you won't be here.
Yeah.
But that profit has always been reinvested. Now, if you don't have that profit, how do you keep the luxurious surroundings that the customers want to come? That's what they're paying for when they're coming. They're not coming for a plate of food. They're coming for an experience.
Yeah.
And that experience to me is key. And how you represent yourself is how the expectation of a guest coming to the restaurant. And I still want people to be blown away, and I want people to come here and say that was the best meal I've ever had. And delivering that is getting harder.
Yeah, woohoo! Yeah. But no, I think the key point is that you do this because you're unbelievably passionate about your craft. And and probably were back then, and still probably are.
I still am. I last night I spent the evening teaching my stepson how to cook, and I'm very black and white. I don't have a grey area. I have it's right or it's wrong.
The hair these days.
Yeah, well, the hair went 10 years ago, and it's just getting worse. It's when the beard starts getting affected by it, you start looking like Father Christmas. But that non-grey area, this is how you chop an onion. There is no point in me teaching someone 5 ways to chop an onion, because I've crafted and I've learned how to chop an onion quicker and better than anyone else. So I try and transfer that information so they haven't got the next 35 years wasting their time trying to work out what I worked out. And that's the bit that we're trying to do. We're developing people a lot quicker than we used to. People, in the kitchen, you have a structure of, normally you have the head chef, then you have the sous chef, which is a French term for second chef. Then you would have a junior sous chef, which is the junior guy waiting to go up to that next level. Then you would have chef de parties. Now, a chef de partie is in charge of a section in the kitchen. So you'll have one on the meats, you'll have one on the meat garnish. So normally in a kitchen of my size, there's 7 or 8 chef de parties downstairs. Then you would have the lower level, which is demi chef de parties. They're the ones that's waiting to go up. And then before that, you'd have the commis. Commis don't really exist anymore, which is a real shame, like apprenticeships. That doesn't really exist anymore because of the pay structure and the hours that people work. A junior member of staff in the kitchen now is earning a basic of 32, plus tips on top of that. So, we've got 19-year-old chefs downstairs earning £39,000.
Yeah, it's not bad, eh?
It's not a bad salary anymore, is it? Yeah. And that's the question that hospitality used to be. The salaries were awful. And they were when I was growing up. I earned £6,000 as my first position. I went to France after being a senior sous chef in a 1-star Michelin. I went to France for $5,500. And you ask yourself the question, how did you survive? You didn't survive. You were eating into your savings just to work there. But you took that experience as... If I look at my daughters are at university, and I look at how much it's cost them to go and earn that degree that they've worked for, but they're coming out with massive debts. And the way the hospitality industry used to be is you didn't earn the money, but you didn't have the debts, but you learnt your craft. Now what's happening is you're joining this industry on a brilliant wage to start with, and what's going to happen is your growth within that business is not going to grow as quickly because the businesses don't have the finances to keep giving you pay rises, because we're already paying for your education.
There's a total saturation point with that for sure. Anyway.
Yes, positive.
Yes, no, it's all good. It's all good. But look,
it needs to be looked at, because the situation is these conversations are not conversations that people want to hear, but it's the truth of what we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're a positive show, but at the same time, we're not naive enough to understand that there's problems of the day.
Yes,
and the problems of the day that we have are real, and they're here and they're now.
Well, we're watching so many restaurants every week. There's a different restaurant closing, and that's
high-profile ones as well,
and big ones that you would never have thought that this would have hit them. And you're at the moment, I'm sitting here watching people close and making sure that we're not.
Yeah, well, that's the main thing.
That's the positive.
That is the main thing for sure. Right. Well, I mean, you kind of already alluded to the start of your career, but how did you get into hospitality in the first place? What was the spark?
At school, I hated it, really hated. I don't know, to this day, I don't quite understand why I hated it, but I felt, well, I do understand. It goes back, and if we've got time, I can go through it. But when I've got a stepsister who's three days older than me. So we were in the same level at school, and she went into class 11, which was the top class. I went into class 12, which was one down from her. And then when we went up to the second year, I went down a class again. And then when we went into third year, I went down a class again. And by this point, I was writing in sand. And I was like asking myself the question of, really, is this... I wasn't arrogant about it. I was just like, I felt like I'd got let down by the schooling. And then what happened is work experience came along. And you go and see the person talk about work experience, and I didn't have a clue. My dad's an engineer, my mum was a psychiatric nurse. I've had more step parents than anyone I know, and I had people coming into my life and going out of my life. I was brought up by my dad. I wasn't brought up by my mum. I saw my mum not on a very regular basis, but she's still a part of my life. And I went into this work experience conversation, and it came out that I ended up going to hospitality, and I went to Canterbury University, and I worked in a kitchen doing 1,000 covers a day. And basically I was there for 2 weeks just helping out. But I felt something in the kitchen. I felt this feeling of camaraderie. I felt like this I was actually a part of something, and I felt a part of it, and I felt like I really enjoyed it. I loved the banter. I loved the way that things had very specific ways of doing. And it wasn't about the cooking. It was about being a part of something. And then, funny enough, I got a report, and I had lunch with my dad last Sunday, and we talked about this. And I got a report from the head chef, and it was my work experience report, and every box was excellent.
Right.
And I put it in front of my dad on the Friday evening, and my dad physically couldn't believe it. So my dad drove to the university on the Monday with me and made me sit down in the office because he thought I'd forged the thing. And the chef,
right.
And the chef actually said, no, Daniel's been absolutely exceptional. And my dad boldly asked, would you take him on?
Right.
And the gentleman agreed straight away. He said, yes, of course we'd take Daniel on. So I left school early.
Did you want to go there?
Well, do you know something? It felt right. It felt, I did really, really enjoy it. I absolutely loved it. And so I went to the university, started work. They enrolled me in a day release system at college. That college, as soon as I started college, I was in a class of about 32. And it wasn't until then that I started realising, that guy over there, he knows how to fillet a fish. That guy over there, he knows how to take a chicken apart. I wasn't going to learn any of that information at the university. We were buying all our fish. It was all pre-portioned. The chickens, there was no prep. They just put them in. They were for curry, so they put whole chickens in the oven, cooked them until they were cooked, and then physically ripped them apart with their hands and put them in a curry sauce. But I thought it was good at that point. It wasn't until at the college that I realised, this is a big world, this, and I'm a very small part of it. And then I went home one afternoon, said to my dad, I'm not learning enough. These people are so much further advanced than me. So I wrote to 5 hotels locally, got a job with an amazing head chef. He'd worked in some Michelin-starred restaurants before. Andrew Leach, his name was. He was a vegan, really weird because he was a vegan, but wrote
ahead of his time.
Yeah, massively. This was back in probably 89. So his wife was Thai. He was a vegan. Cooked some outrageous food with him, but it was a hotel that did lots of banqueting. So we did there was 4 of us in the kitchen. I was a commie, did every section, did the washing up as well, because we couldn't afford a kitchen porter, that's what the business said. And I did 2 years there, and then one day I came in and the head chef said to me, Daniel, there's a copy of The Caterer, which was, it was a thick magazine that used to come out every week, and it was our trade magazine, and in the back there was always jobs advertised, and he'd circled 3 places. He said, I want you to apply to these. I said, Chef, you want me to leave? He said, I can't teach you anymore, Daniel. We don't get the right ingredients for me to transfer that information so you can carry on your career. I said, okay. So I wrote to these 3 places, got interviews. They were all 1 or 2 star restaurants. Put my notice in, got the job. And the rest is history, really. It just then it became, I was obsessed by working at the best places. And if I heard someone was great, that's where I wanted to go and work.
Yeah. What I really love about that, though, is the chap that you worked for, who kind of knowingly could see something in you, obviously, that was going to be quite spectacular. And all of a sudden, you'd reached the ceiling with him. So
well, he wasn't selfish, was he?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've tried to achieve here is you've got to know when to let someone fly, and there's no point holding them back, because at the end of the day is we're sponges as humans. We're sponges, and we take in as much information. And it's funny, that experience with him sort of made my career. I went to places and worked for 6 months. And people would say, oh, you've got to do a year, you've got to do a year. You've only got to do a year if you're not taking in the information. If you're dedicated to that place, you might not be doing the meat section, but if you've got an intelligence, you can watch what they're doing. And this is the interesting, we'll get onto the France bit in a minute, but what I realised is I was working away from home, so my first job was at a place called the Bell at Ashton Clinton after the chef in Kent, and there was 19 of us in the kitchen, and I did my 6 months. I did the garnish section there, I did a bit of the meat section, and I did some of the lard. I didn't touch the pastry, but I was going into the pastry at the end of the service, and I was trying to help. Everyone else was going home, and I was standing there because there's nothing else for me to do. I was in the middle of Buckinghamshire. I knew no one. I had staff accommodation. It was like, well, what am I going to go? Go home and drink a beer? That doesn't interest me. I'll stay here and learn. And that's what I started to do. And it just sort of developed into this, right, it's time to move. Right, it's time to move. It's right time to move. And to be honest, you're just gathering information. You're like a magpie, just constantly taking things. And this is what I tried to do to the lads here. Like my head chef now, Liam, he worked for me 5 years ago. He did 5 years with me because he came very, very young, and he's left, gone and worked at some of the best restaurants in the world, stayed in contact, and now he's come back to run the kitchen. And to be honest, you couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, and that's brilliant as well, right? Because you've given him the opportunity to go and learn new things, which he can bring here. Right?
100%. Yeah. It's we're both progressing from his experiences abroad. So yeah, it's a win-win conversation.
Yeah. So the France bit, as you called it.
Before we moved to the France bit, so I did the Bell at Ashton Clinton, and then, funny enough, the sous chef left, and he asked me to go with him, and he was reopening the Box Tree in Ilkley, which was the first ever 2-star restaurant in this country, and it used to be owned by a couple, Malcolm Reed, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But they had sold it. It had been bought by a lady, and she'd bought Kevin, who was the sous chef, in to run it. So went there, did my 6 months with Kevin. There was only 3 of us in the kitchen, so it was much more intense because the business had just started, so they didn't have the finances to have a big brigade. But means that I think I was probably 18 at this point. So, but you're learning so much more because you're having to do so much more. And then he fell out with the owner. And the owner brought Marco in, and
the Marco.
Yeah, the Marco. Yeah.
Well, no, he didn't go on to do anything.
He didn't. Marco was. This was when he was at his height. This is when he.
Oh right, okay.
This is before he moved and got 3 stars. So he was running Harvey's at this point, and he was like everywhere. Everyone wanted to be Marco, and I don't think I've ever been so nervous in all my life. The stories I'd heard, and I'd read the book, the White Heat had inspired me more than anything. It's probably the only cookery book I've read cover to cover. It's the only book I've ever read cover to cover. And it was like, oh my God, this is a different world. I didn't realise what was out there. And I'd worked for him. They fell out. Then I went to work with one of Marco's friends. Marco got me a job at a guy called Simon Guella. And that was just 2 of us in the kitchen. So Simon would cook the meat and the fish, and I would do everything else. And one of the best experiences of my life, because when you're working with someone solely, you're picking up everything.
Yeah.
And I try to do that here. I try to take the boys apart, and I try to have like development. I'll develop with one of the lads, and I will stick with him for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I will change that because I think that one-on-one training is so crucial because that's how you learn quicker. And then after that, I went to work at a restaurant called Gordonton Mill Hotel, which was down in near Lymington, and it had a Michelin star. Christophe Novelli used to be the chef there. Toby Hill had taken over. We'd won the Michelin star. But one day, Toby came in, and Toby was classically a pastry chef, and he'd been given the head chef role. And I'd worked in some good restaurants by this point, and I was the sous chef in the kitchen. And Toby came in and he said, oh, I've got this new dish. Can you prep everything? So I prepped everything for him. He said, right, okay, I'm going to cook it just before service. And he started cooking it. And I was thinking, God, I recognise this. And he put it up and he said, right, it's navran of fish. That's what we're going to call it. And I looked at it, and this is before phones, this is before you could take pictures. And one of my best mates was the guy, he was the chef de partie next to me, James. And James was like raving about this dish, saying, "Oh, how amazing is that?" You know, blah. And I lived with James, and I got home that night, and I opened up White Heat, and I said, "There you go, Navarana fish."
Right.
Straight out of Marco's book. And it was carbon copy. The restaurant, he'd copied the sauce, written it out on a piece of paper and asked me to make it. But I'd made it when I worked for Marco, so I was like,
yeah, this is ringing a bell.
yeah, this is a bit confusing, really. I've worked for the master who designed the dish. I'm now working for someone who's cowboying it. This is weird. I'm not going to learn any more here. But I'd been around England by that point, and I'd really got myself into a situation where I knew what was going on in other kitchens, because you do. It's a way, you know, one chef leaves you and goes work at Le Manoir. Suddenly, all your chefs are still talking to him, so you know what's happening at Le Manoir.
Sure, yeah.
The rumours fly around this industry before it's even hit the press. And I thought to myself, everyone wants to be Marco, because Marco hadn't got 3 stars at this point, but he was the person in the industry everyone was talking about.
No, he was a kind of rock star. Really, wasn't he?
Do you know something? He changed the face of this industry. He made chefs famous. He made chefs recognisable. Before Marco's day, if you walked into the Ritz, you didn't know who the chef in the kitchen was. You knew who the maitre d' was. It was the maitre d' who you wanted to get to know, because he was the guy that looked after you. It wasn't until Marco that changed. And that's really, really true in this country. We know, yeah, if we look back prior to Marco, yeah, we know the Albert Roux, we know they're the pyramid. They're the ones at the top of the pyramid, and it sort of goes down. And it's interesting because you're part of that pyramid now, but you never see that. But then, so I saw this dish that really, really aggravated me, and I just was like, I've cooked this before. What am I doing with this guy? He's a pastry chef. He's not going to take me any further. I'm now putting dishes on the menu myself that I've cooked in other restaurants, but I don't really want to be cooking someone else's food. If I was going to cook his food, I might as well be working for him and going through the meal there, which I've already done. So it was 2 French waiters, Sebastian and Stefan, and they were twins. And I got on with them really well. And I said to them, I think I'm going to go to France. Because in White Heat, Marco had always put, France is the finishing ground. And I haven't made it there yet. And I was like, Marco Pierre White, 2 Michelin stars, writes in his book, France is the finishing ground. Okay, well, France it is.
Enough for me.
Yeah, I'm off to France.
Yeah.
So I hand wrote 68 letters to all of the 2 stars and all of the 3 stars. And I was so petrified about the chef finding out that I put my dad's address, which was in Kent, but I was working in Leamington. So no mobile phones. So every evening I'd finish work, I'd go home, I'd get in the local phone box, I'd ring my dad to see if there's any responses. No, son, no responses. No, son, no responses. And then one day a letter turned up, and it was all in French. And my dad is as English as they come. The only language he speaks is engineering, and he does not know a word of French. Bonjour are probably pushing it. So my dad's trying to translate a letter to me down the phone, which I had no idea. And it was like, right, okay. Did I get a job, or is it an offer or not? And the first one was Georges Blanc, which was a classic 3-star restaurant in France. One of the, it's one of those highlights that you always want to go to. And they wanted me to pay them to go there.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, right, okay, for your accommodation and your food while you're with us, it's going to cost you this. But it was all in French. Yeah? And over the phone, I thought that was the salary they were going to pay me, because my dad didn't have a clue and I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
So he sent the letter on to me, and I gave it to Stefan, and Stefan said, no, they want you to... there's a lot of things in life I'll do, but I'm not going to pay to go and work somewhere. Anyway, luckily 2 more offers came in. One was a restaurant called Jean Bardet, and another one was in the south of France, Hotel Martinez it was, and they both were commis positions. And I accepted the one at Jean Bardet, which was in the middle of Tours, which is the Garden of France. And arrogant Daniel, yep, I'm a sous chef here. I know how to cook, no problem at all. Got on the ferry. My dad was crying. I've never seen my dad cry. Like, I'm only going to France, Dad. Yeah. But in them days, I might as well go to America. But
you're not that old.
No, but well, I feel it. Yeah. But I got to France, found my accommodation. I did the walk, so I knew the route to get to work. And then the first day came, and I woke up that morning, and I don't think I've ever been so petrified.
Really?
It didn't kick in until that morning.
Right.
And
well, I mean, there's a lot to take in, right?
well, you don't realise that you never think. Maybe it was the excitement, but I didn't realise I couldn't speak French.
Yeah.
So
It's a
small detail when you're working in a kitchen with 26 chefs. So turned up at reception, couldn't even explain to the lady on reception in French what I was there for. The head chef, the owner, was away on holiday. The sous chef hadn't been told that I was coming. He thought I was a stagiaire, which means I was there to work for free. Put me on a section. I started work. I was with this guy. He had the worst teeth in the world. Yeah, like an ugly guy with the worst teeth in the world shouting at you. It's just like, but shouting at you, but you don't understand a word that he's saying. Yeah. It's the weirdest sensation. And then 3 days later, the chef returned from his holiday and basically patted me on the back. And he'd worked at the Savoy, so his English was broken, but he could speak. And he said to the sous chef, no, he's here to work. He's not a stagiaire. So they put me on a section. And they gave me a Japanese commie. But the Japanese commie wasn't being paid. He was a stagiaire. But he couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Japanese. Neither of us could speak French. And we were trying to run a service on the larder section.
You can't really make it up, can you?
No. It was, and the thing is, my area of the kitchen was probably a good 50 yards away from the pass.
Right.
Now, 50 yards is not a long distance, but it's a really long distance when you can't see the checkboard.
Yeah.
So my poor Japanese commie, we got a plan that he was running all the way down there, writing down what it was and bringing it back. And
you're just getting.
This is when I learned, and this is a crucial part of my life, I learned that I don't learn by writing things down. I learn by watching. And I think France was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because you can't communicate. The only way you can learn is to watch someone do something and you mentally take that in. You basically video it in your mind and you say, right, okay, that's how he's taking the lamb apart. And this is quite difficult. Being Daniel, I don't know how to get that across to other people because the way I learn, I'll watch you do something now. And I know, like, when the gas engineer comes in and he changes the thermocouple on the oven, I watch him do it.
And then you've got it.
And then I've got it. So I don't need to call him again because I can do it myself. The same with, right, someone shows me how to make an ice cream. Yep, got that. Yep, got that. I don't have a recipe written down. I don't write anything down. Everything is done by a mental note. And it's confusing for everyone around me. But for me, I sit there like Kingpin saying, yep, that's how we do it, that's how we do it, that's how we do it. But the thing is, I can show them how to do it, and I expect them to learn the same way. I don't know if I'm different, but I do know that's the way that I operate. And that's all learned from being in a country where you can't speak the language. And it's funny, I got promoted. The chef really took a shine to me, wanted me to stay, because I remember a 3-star chef came to eat at the restaurant. And he took me to the side to introduce me to this 3-star chef because he was really proud of me. And it's funny, it was Guy Savoy. And at that point, Gordon Ramsay was working for him in France. And he turned around to my chef and said, it's funny, the English lads have got this absolutely ability. They are workhorses. And to this day, the French and the Americans love an English chef because an English chef has got this bit between his teeth where he gives 110% every time.
Yeah.
And the French don't. It's funny because when I finish work every night, and I was there for 9 months, and for the first 6 months, all the chefs, when I was walking down this long, like a mile driveway to get out of it was a hotel restaurant, and they'd all drive past, and it'd be pouring me rain, and I'd be thinking, not one of them asked me to lift, not one of them asked me for a lift. And it wasn't until they respected me that they started offering me a lift. And that's France.
Right. Yeah, you got to earn the stripes, as it were.
100%.
I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that as well, right? I mean, especially because what it kind of taught you.
Well, it taught me to be resilient. Yeah. And it taught me to focus on what I was doing and not to worry about what everyone else is doing. And I think that's the key to it. Is we started this conversation in a negative way, but I don't care what everyone else is doing in the country. That doesn't really bother me at all. This person could be charging that. This person could be charging that. I run Midsummer House as a standalone restaurant. I run it with, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to cook. We don't copy anyone else's food. We're very creative. Everything we do is we start with nothing. We start with a duck, and the dish is built out of that duck. It's not built out of what we've seen on the internet or what we've seen here. It's all from cooking that duck, tasting that duck, right, what's in season, what's going to go with that duck. And do you know what? There's only one dish on the menu in 26 years that keeps coming back, and that's the scallop dish, because I can't think of how to make it any better. Right. But everything else has changed.
Right, yeah.
And the worst bit about me is I've spent years saying I don't like change. But change is the best thing in the world, because at the end of the day, change is what keeps us going and keeps us motivated.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And even in the throes of what we find ourselves in with all the challenges, it's just initiating change, right?
Yeah.
And it has done. And it is changing.
It's made us stronger. That's the thing is the more some people, the more pressure you put on them, the more they shine. I think I've always been in that situation. And I think that starts with, I've got an older brother. He did brilliantly at school, always compared to him. And I wasn't very good at school. And everyone's like, oh, your brother's doing really well. Your brother's doing really well. And that's why I left Kent. Because I felt I was always going to be in my brother's shadow. And the thing is it's strange. My relationship with my brother is we're still 15. Still now to this day, we're still 15. And every time I go home, he still treats me like 15-year-old Daniel. Right. Because I've never lived there.
Right.
So it's pros and cons, isn't it? Life's weird. And to be honest with you, it's the older you get, the more you realise that your future is in your own hands.
Yeah, here. Could not agree more. So, back in France.
Yes.
What happened next?
Well, funny enough, again, sous chef had worked for a 3-star chef, and he said to me, Daniel, Mark Minot is looking for chef de parties. I'd like to put you forward. I was like, really? He said, yeah. So I went for my interview. I'd been in France at this point about 8 months, and you're contracted in France every 3 months. You have to sign a new contract. And
that keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, 100%. There's no... and it literally is the day of your contract, you get called into the office and the chef discusses with you whether you're staying or going. It does definitely keep you. And so I went for the interview, had about a 3/4 an hour interview with Mark Minot, who I'd read so much about, and he was like a French legend and everyone had heard of him. He was one of the ones that started Haute Cuisine, and an absolute legend. And I sat in there and the whole interview was in French. And to be honest with you, I came out thinking to myself, I think I know how much I'm going to earn. I think I've got to find my own accommodation. And to be totally honest with you, if I do another year here, I'm going to be in financial difficulty. So I came home to England, and I had a 2-week break between starting there and leaving my old job. So I came back for 2 weeks, stayed at my dad's house. And my previous chef that I'd worked for, Simon, the one I'd had one-on-one with, was opening a new restaurant in Leeds. And he said to me, Daniel, it was the 13th of February. I remember I had 2 weeks off and I was meant to be starting at the end of February in Mark Minot. And he said to me, oh, what are you doing? I said, well, I've got 2 weeks off, chef. He said, oh, why don't you come up? I'll show you the new restaurant. I said, okay. So I drove up that evening on the 13th, got there quite late, booked into a travel lodge. He said, oh, why don't you come in and work tomorrow? And I didn't, to be totally honest with you, at this stage of my life, Valentine's Day, I didn't really care about it. I didn't even know it was the thing probably then. And little did I know that he had 80 for lunch and 80 for dinner, and he had no one to cook the meat. And
that is a clever lad.
Yeah, very clever.
Opportunity there.
So I walked in the morning. He said, right, you're going to cook the meat. I said, right, okay. So jumped on the meat. First time I'd worked in a big restaurant. Like, this place would do 150 on a Saturday night, and there was 6 of us in the kitchen. It was a machine.
Jeez, yeah.
I'd never experienced anything like this. But we got our first Michelin. Well, so basically, I'll finish the story there. And at the end of the evening, I had nowhere to stay. And we'd finished about 12:30 at night, and I was going to drive home. And he said, Daniel, can I just have a word? I said, yeah, of course you can. He said, I want you to take the sous chef job. but chef, I'm meant to be going to France. Yeah, but think of the money, think of the position. I want to get a Michelin star here. You'd be amazing. So I sacked off the job in France, took the job there. We got our first Michelin star in that first year. We got 4 out of 5 in the Good Food Guide, and basically we won Yorkshire Restaurant of the Year. We won Best Restaurant Outside London of the Year, and I felt that we were moving forward, and I was. After about 6 months, once we'd got the star, he started to come in later and later and later, and I was taking more and more and more responsibility. And the restaurant was making a fortune, because there was only 6 of us in the kitchen. If I do the maths now, I think to myself, they must have been making an absolute fortune.
Wow, business head.
Because main courses there, back in them days, and you've got to understand, this is like 95, 96, they were charging like £35, £40 then.
Right.
And so the place must have been making a fortune. I did 2.5 years. I bought a house.
Did you like the fact that he was kind of taking more and more of a step back? Was it a good experience for you for that? Because you were I suppose getting.
It was a good experience until he came in.
Right.
And then he'd come in at 11 o'clock and find all the faults.
Right.
But the faults were in my head that we weren't set up to be that scenario. Yeah, it's fine that he can come in at 11 o'clock, but you can't start moaning about things that you haven't shown people. You know, he'd come in, if Leeds United lost, he'd sack the pastry chef.
Oh God, right.
And you'd be like, well, Leeds are going to leave, you know, they're not a great team. They're losing every week.
Yeah, people getting sacked every week.
Yeah, and you're standing there, and he'd sack someone and then sit in the office for 2 hours. And you'd be like, and then he'd come out like angry, like really, really angry. And you'd be like, but chef, you're just creating an atmosphere in this place that's making it negative. It's not positive. And if it's one for all, be here at 8 o'clock with all of us pushing on, and then the mistakes wouldn't be happening. Because if you're expecting me to run the meat, the fish, the sauce, the pass, how can I see what's going on? But looking back on it now, that's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I managed to pick up on the mistakes and I learned from it. Anyway, he offered me, I bought a house, he offered me a position within the company. He'd signed a 7-hotel deal where he was going to be the executive chef. He was going to keep Raskas, and he wanted me to become the head chef of all these 7 hotels. So I was going to be the one overlooking it. He'd offered me a company car. He'd offered to change my salary from 15 grand to about 28 grand. And back in them days, that was quite a big salary move for me. I'd bought a house in Leeds. It seemed all right, but it never seemed. We designed this kitchen, but he didn't tell me where the property was. And he said to me there was 7 in line. And then as long as he was getting paid monthly to be this consultant, but it never seemed to come off. And about 6 months of still being at Raskas, still doing the same job, still working with the attitude, this came up. And I thought to myself, I'm doing it for someone else. I might as well go and do it for myself. And so I met my business partner. We had a discussion. I was very green. I was 25. You know, you think you know a lot.
Wow, 25.
25, yeah.
Jeez.
I've got chef de parties downstairs older than me. That age now.
Yeah.
So I opened up, didn't understand what laundry costs were, didn't understand what a GP was. I didn't understand anything about running a business.
So you're talking about
Midsummer,
where we're sat now?
Yeah, Midsummer, yeah.
Wow, bloody hell.
So
I've got to track you back a bit, actually, because I want to understand also kind of like the vision, like seeing this place, a house on the edge of a common, basically is what it looks like, from the outside looking in. How did you see the vision? Like, why here? Why did it? What did you see that you went? Yeah.
So I came down on a Sunday, and it was probably June. Yeah, it was June because I started in August, and I drove down from Leeds, and Leeds is a city, and it's a busy city, and you don't see much green, you don't see much, it's very hustle and bustle, and it's up north, big portions. They like to eat, they like to socialise, And then I came down here on a Sunday, and I remember I drove past Jesus Green, which is the next green along. And I parked my car, and all these families were having picnics, and there's an outside swimming pool. And then I walked along here, and I saw the building, and I'd already looked in the Michelin guide. There had never been a Michelin-starred restaurant in Cambridge.
That's quite remarkable, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it had never. And I was like, is there a reason behind that? Why is this? And I thought Cambridge is not too far from my parents, because my mum lives in Norfolk, my dad lives in Canterbury. And I'd been living in Leeds, and I thought to myself, do you know what? This is a nice place to live. I never wanted to go to London. I'd worked in London, and London, your secondhand news really quickly. You see it, all of these restaurants opening, they get massive press, massive coverage, and then in 2 years' time, there's 10 more people that's opened up and taken over that mantle, and you're like, so came here, looked at it, thought to myself, do you know what, this is quite cute, I can make this work, yeah, and then the journey began, and it's not until you start it that you realise what's kept you here and why, and on opening day, I remember it so clearly that Michael Winner had booked in the night before.
God. Remember him?
Oh yeah, winners' dinners. Oh my God, he was feared in the industry. If you had Michael Winner in, it was either going to go one way or the other way, and there was no other way it was going to go.
And I suppose definitely back then they could make or break you as well.
Yeah,
right?
110%. This is opening night,
right?
And he was doing a lecture in one of the universities, and they'd bought him, so he'd come with like 3 young ladies, a gentleman and his partner and him, and they'd sat in the restaurant, and you know, he was friends with Michael Caine. I knew everything about him, and I hadn't watched any of the movies he made, but I knew about him and knew his post, and it was my first night, and about 11:45 we were setting up, and it was dinner, we were opening for dinner, we weren't opening for lunch. We had a big mixer in the pastry, and the kitchen wasn't nothing like this. It was a lot smaller, and the only place we could put this mixer was on the fridge, because there was nowhere else to put it, but we needed it to make the bread, so the mixer was going, and it was around the corner, and suddenly I had this massive bang, and the mixer had fallen off the fridge.
Oh God.
While it was going round. The mixer had shattered. I was like, oh God, at least the bread's made for today, that's one thing done. And then my wife phoned me and told me she was pregnant.
Right.
And this was opening day. And it was like, I've got Michael Winner for dinner, the mixer's just fallen off, it's opening night, and Michael Winner's in. So did the service, it went okay. It was the first time the waiters had seen the food. And then we waited and waited and waited, and then 3 weeks later the review came out, and it was good. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. He was being his normal grumpy as well. Yeah, he was his grumpy normal self. He'd had a picture with me in the restaurant, which I thought was going to be positive, and it was positive. And then that was okay. And then it's sort of like, you don't realise when you take on something, you don't realise the responsibility you're taking on until you're in it. And then you start looking at the problems, and it was the problems that were like, well, we haven't got enough plates. We haven't got enough plates to do 40 customers, but we can't afford to buy any plates, so what are we going to do? Like, what are we going to do for pans? I haven't got enough pans. I'd worked in these beautiful kitchens all around the world where they'd had beautiful pans, and I was buying my pans from Millets, and they were enamel milk boiling pans because they heated up quicker than anything, and I'd smash both sides of it so they had like a lip on it, like a jug, so I could... Everything was done because they didn't have a team.
Wow, they're finding ways to get by, right?
And that's the interesting thing. And this is where my relationship with my dad is such a practical man that every time I phoned him up and said, look, the week before we opened, I said to him, Dad, I need to tile the kitchen. What do you mean you need to tile the kitchen? I said, well, the kitchen's got no tiles in it, Dad. Yeah, but Daniel, you don't know anything about tiling. I said, no, I don't know anything about tiling.
This is why I'm phoning you.
This is why, but I said, the situation is I can't afford for a tiler to come in and do it, Dad, so I need to do it myself. So over the phone, he gave me a step-by-step how to tile a kitchen. And that's how Midsummer was born, and that's how the attitude has always gone forward. And to be honest with you, did I think we'd be here 26 years later? No, I didn't know.
No, God, I mean, no. But what I love about that as well is that beyond, obviously, your capability as a chef, is that now you're learning business, right? Like true business, not
the hard way.
Yes, yeah, indeed. But is there any better way than to?
There's only one way to learn it, and that's to make mistakes and learn from them. And you make loads of mistakes because the thing about us chefs is we're passionate animals, and what we are is we want the best of the best now. We're magpies. We're looking at things. I want that cutlery. I want that. I want that. Why do you want that? Well, it's the best. Why has it got to be the best? Because the best will help me get Michelin stars. Really? The plate is going to make a difference. But in your mind, all the 3 stars that you visit are using this certain type of plate. So you think you've got to use them plates. But them plates are 120 quid each. And to be honest with you, if you've got 6 covers booked for dinner, you can't afford them plates. So you buy 5 of them plates, and then the next month you buy another 5 of them plates, and then you cherish them plates because that's the other part of Daniel that only the staff really know about. I'm so protective over everything, and I know what I've had to do to get that. So now looking after it is. That's more of a priority than anything because you're looking after your assets, but you only learn that from your mistakes. Yeah. But I mean that is like for anybody who's listening, who has aspirations of having their own place at some point. These are the important things that people have to understand, right? 100%.
Is that you could be the best chef in the world without question, and you could create a wonderful plate of food that people will come to experience. But if you don't get on top of
won't be here.
The other stuff. Yeah. Then there's nothing. No. If you don't understand your marketing plan for next week, or if you've got a quiet week, you've got to know how to balance everything. Everything is a balance. It's not all plough forward. There's so many places. I said this to my chefs 10 years ago, and it's funny. Some of the ones that have left that ring me up now, they still mention it. And I said to them, this industry is going to become like Premiership football clubs. It's top restaurants are going to be owned by multi-millionaires because it's the only way they will be able to operate in the future, because the line is getting finer and finer and finer, and at the end of the day is the creative part of the job is getting dismissed by the business side of the job because we're fighting that side. Yeah. And it confuses the creative side. And this is why you need good people in every position. It's not just your kitchen, it's not just your restaurant, it is your back of house that people don't see. They're the unsung heroes, they're the ones that make it work, they're the ones that balance the books for you. You're the one that's just guiding them how to do it. Yeah. The back of house people, the amount of times that I've spoken to, well, kind of anyone really who's started there, and I include myself in this as well. One of the first jobs I ever had was kitchen porter. Yeah. One of the best jobs I've ever had. I love it. I watched Up Saturday Night. Yeah, it's just it's no, but I did. I did the pans for about an hour and a half, and then I did the plates. Well, me and my wife did the plates at the end of the evening, because you can see 120, 240, 360. Oh yeah, there's £450 worth of plates there, and the waiters are keeping putting more on top of it, and you're like, what's more important, Daniel? What's more important? So yeah, me and my wife washed up on Saturday night. But the end of the day is do you know what? That just goes to show that we're prepared to do anything. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Which you have to be. Yeah, 100%. As an entrepreneur, which is basically what you are now. That happens to be. Yeah, I cut the grass. I do everything. And do you know something? I actually, what I enjoy about that is it gives me 20 minutes to myself. It gives me 20 minutes for my thoughts to actually, washing up is so therapeutic, because all you got to do is scrub. All you got to do is make sure, and if I always make sure my pans are cleaner than anyone else's, so you set the example. So the day is no one can turn around and say, Chef, he's had enough of it. If you're prepared to do it, everyone should be prepared to do it. Yeah, totally. So 26 years you've been here. Yeah. When did you get star one? So opened in 1998, August. Got the first star. It felt like it wasn't going to come. And it's funny, the year I got the star, I had put some feelers out, because I was starting to think Cambridge wasn't going to be the place, and the doubt started to kick in. Right. Because I knew I was cooking good food, but that transformation of food that I'd learned from other people
and my food hadn't happened yet. It was sort of like a mixture, and it was a bit like I was using Marco's recipe for stock, I was using David's recipe for this, hadn't really started to create my own, hadn't really broken down it. And I think this is the master of a chef, is you learn a recipe, but only someone who thinks outside the box can change that recipe to make that recipe work for a different ingredient.
Right.
Because basically cooking in my brain is quite a simple thing. Because once you've learnt to make a base sauce, if you think about the flavours that if you're making a red wine sauce, it's basically you reduce your red wine and pour it down separately. There's a reason for that, but people don't ask that question. If I give you an example, the red wine sauce that I originally was taught is you'd sweat your shallots down in thing, then you'd add your red wine and your port, and you would reduce that down, and then you'd add your stock, and then you'd add your herbs, and then you'd add your garlic and your peppercorns and your bay leaves, and then you would just cook that out. But when you pass it off, you've got your 10 shallots that are in there for flavour, for sure, but you pass them off, and all the colour of the red wine has gone into the shallots. And it's like a light bulb moment. You stand there and you say to yourself, but I'm throwing that away, because I'm passing it off, and you put it through your sieve, and then you put it through muslin cloth. So you put it through single muslin cloth, then you put it through single muslin cloth, and you pass this sauce 7 times. And every time you're passing it, there's sediment in the bottom, and you're asking yourself, there's still sediment. But if you have the sediment in the sauce will never go glossy, because it's the particles that's stopping it going glossy. So we pass it 7 times. But on that initial pass, you look at the shallots and you think, so they're a beautiful ruby colour. Mm. It took me probably 10 years to realise, reduce the red wine separately, sweat the shallots off, add the stock to the shallots, cook the sauce out without the red wine, get the flavour, and then add the reduced wine to the sauce.
Oh, right. And
you've got the colour is transformed, because you haven't lost the colour by the shallots sponging the colour up. And it seems such an easy, simple thing to do, but once again, if habits become, this is how I was taught to do it, yeah, and you stick to that, you've become this, there's no change in the food. The food's never going to change. Mm. Cooking is an expression of yourself. This is what I said earlier. I hated change, but I've always loved it. Deep down, it's one of these things. I'm sort of conflicting myself there, but I'm also, that's the way my brain operates. So now I'm constantly questioning. Okay, we were taught to cook that in butter. Why are we cooking it in butter? And now when someone asks me a question, it's, as I said to you earlier, I was cooking with my stepson yesterday, and I confidently now can give him the answers he needs. Mm. Like yesterday, I showed him how to cook chicken. And I said to him, right, it needs 2 minutes on this side, then it needs 2 minutes on this side, then you add the butter. When you add the butter, then you mix it round, but you don't mix it round. You never, ever, because when someone seals a piece of meat, they seal it, but they keep moving it. And what they don't understand about that is, what you're trying to do is caramelize the piece of meat. If you keep moving it, what you're doing is the water is coming out, and the water makes the pan go cold, and then you're boiling something. And then what you're doing is you're not getting that roasting effect, you're getting a boiling effect. And then what happens is the water reduces because you've brought the water out of the meat, and then that water basically evaporates, but then it burns. And then that's when you start burning your meat. But it's the only way you learn that is but through practice.
Yeah. God, I'm glad this is, I'm recording this, because this is very useful for my Sunday.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
Yeah, so you're you got your star.
First star in 2003.
Yep.
That petrified me.
Right.
Absolutely threw me to the wolves. I was like,
Why
oh
was
my
that?
God.
Because you're now on the map,
No, but do
basically.
you know something? Working in the 90s and the early 2000s, especially, I started when I was in 89, and I had 10 years before I opened this. And this is why I'm so lucky that my dad did take me to the university, because it gave me them 10 years. But I was so much younger than everyone else, so I'd taken in that information. And then you're put down. There's no compliments in this industry. No one comes and pats you on the back on a Saturday night and says, well done, Daniel, you did a great job tonight. They always come to you and say...
I can do that. I'm available.
But what I'm trying to say to you is, as a chef de partie going through the ranks, it was always, at the end of the night, right, well, your Pom Maximes weren't right, this wasn't right, this wasn't right. It was never... They always found fault. They never found quality. The end of the day is you could have had the best night of your life, but they still find a reason. And it was a put-down attitude, and that's what hospitality was. It was a constant put-down attitude. And you sort of become, especially with my younger childhood, like my dad used to say that I was going to be a bin man, because useless at school, what is Daniel going to be? Everyone was worried about me.
I actually noted on your, when I asked the question about the three reasons why you should come into hospitality, and your number one was it keeps you out of jail.
100%.
Yeah.
And well, that's a different aspect. That's proper junior Daniel. But because people have always said you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, there is a point when that's if someone tells you that enough, you do. You start doubting yourself, and self-doubt is something. And I'd opened up in 1998. I remember very clearly in 2002, I thought to myself, is this going to happen? Is this ever going to happen? Michelin had been in. We knew they'd been in. Didn't give anything away, like they never do. And then the guy came out, and I remember one of my best friends phoned me that morning and said to me, have you phoned the Michelin? I said, look, if something's going to happen, they would phone me. And he said, are you sure? I said, and he was working for John Burton Race, which was a 2-star chef at that point. And he said, Daniel, I think you should ring him. I said, nah, I'm in the middle of a stock take. I had a stock taker waiting while I was on the phone. And I went down, and Jerry was the stock taker. I'd known Jerry for a few years, and we got on. And he said, are you all right? You look stressed. I said, oh, that's one of my mates. He said, Michelin's out today. He said, well, do you want to ring them? He said, don't worry about me, Daniel. I've got all day. And when that thing is clicking in your mind.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, confidence has never been my forte. So I came into the restaurant. I left the stock taker down the back doing the stock take, and I came up and I called Justin, who was my manager at that point. And I said to him, Justin, my mate's just been on the phone. He reckons we should ring Michelin. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, you ring them. And he said, are you sure? I said, yeah. So he phoned them, and he got through, and he said, it's Justin Robinson from Midsummer House. I'm just ringing up to see if we can find out exactly where we are in the guidebook this year. He said, oh, yes, just to let you know, you've been awarded your first Michelin star. And I was like,
why do I have to call you?
No, I was in the background, and he obviously got the information, and he was still like being all polite and nice on the phone. I was like, come on. And anyone knows me. I'm like, just tell me. Anyway, he put the phone down, told me. I was like, oh my God, the pressure now. We're a Michelin star restaurant now. We've got to perform. It's suddenly that pressure was like, oh my God. And then I started to relax into it, started to enjoy it. The restaurant definitely took off. We started to get more influential people coming to eat. People recognised us. We were definitely on the map. And to this day, I will 100% swear by this. I was so scared of losing it. It sort of made me into the devil for that year and a half afterwards. And I was so particular about everything. Like, there was not a plate of food that left the past that wasn't good enough. I know that for a fact because I checked everything. I was like a hawk. Everything was checked by me. I was in the kitchen. I was there from 7 in the morning. things broke down in my family life because I dedicated everything to this. I was like 6 days a week in here, whatever. If the walls need painting, I'd be here Sunday night, whatever it took. And then we got our second star in 2002. No, 2005. Four. Was it 4?
I think it's 4, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 4, 2 years later.
Yeah. Because I was going to say,
yeah,
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years, yeah. Now that phone call...
There's definitely a story here.
Oh my God, this is. We'd closed the restaurant in August for our annual shutdown, and we always shut for 2 weeks in August for the staff to have their holidays. And 2 weeks prior to that, because of the staff holidays, I'd planned a massive refurbishment. And I was putting like £700,000 into it, and we were taking the skirting boards off. It was a revamp. It was everything I'd ever wanted to do. And because we'd got the star and we've made some money, I finally had the finances to do it. So I decided that I was going to take the 2 weeks prior off, and they were going to be my holiday. And when we were closed for the 2 weeks, I was going to be here to make sure that the refurbishment went exactly how I wanted it to go. And one of my best friends, and he still is one of my best friends to this day, was Alan, and we'd worked together in Leeds, and I'd asked him to come and replace Justin because Justin had left, and after we got the first star, about a year afterwards, and I brought Alan in because I trusted Alan, and I knew that he had the ability to take us forward. And while I was on holiday, little did I know that we had the head of Michelin in with his number 2, and Alan had spotted it. But he didn't tell anybody.
Right.
He didn't even tell me. And then done the refurbishment, closed for Christmas, like we always do, for 2 weeks. And Michelin used to be released on the 19th of December. Oh, sorry, 19th of January. And it was always, January's the worst month for any restaurant.
Yeah.
Everyone knows January. No one's got any money after Christmas.
Yeah.
So it was always like a highlight, but it was like waiting for Michelin to come out. And Alan had put his notice in just before Christmas. Yeah? So Alan had worked up till Christmas and told me he was leaving. And I'd found a replacement for him, and we left on really good terms. And working away, it was like this, the guide was coming out on the Friday, and the phone went on the Tuesday morning. And I had this quite dopey receptionist, and she came down and she said to me, Daniel, there's a Derek Bulmer from Michelin on the phone. I was like, who? She said, Derek Bulmer from Michelin. So I took the phone off her and went outside. And your fears, once again, you're not thinking positive, you're thinking negative. Knowing the guide is coming out Friday, you'd heard rumours that Michelin, you know, they tell people, they don't tell people, they tell you when you're going to lose a star. And Daniel being negative was like, oh God, brace yourself, Daniel. Yeah, I still get goosebumps thinking about that phone call now. And I went outside. It was a hand portable phone. Stood outside. Hello, Daniel. It's Mr. Bulmer from Michelin. I said, oh, hello. He said, we actually haven't met, have we? I was like, no, we haven't actually. I said, but you have been. He said, yeah, but I've never introduced myself. I was like, right, okay. And you know when a phone call feels like it's going on forever and no one's getting to the point.
Information.
And all you're doing is like liking each other and saying nice things, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, please. I've got everything crossed, thinking to myself, we're going to, don't say. He said, well, just to let you know, you've been promoted to 2 stars in this year's guidebook. And I literally froze and I dropped the phone. And the phone hit the floor, and all I saw was the back of the phone come off and the batteries ping across the garden. And I was like, oh, fuck. I was just on the phone to the head of Michelin. This is like the most important phone call of my life, and I've just fucked it right up.
Just cut them off.
And Michelin being Michelin and them being who they are. And I put the phone down. I went into the kitchen and I said to the chefs, I said, that was the Michelin on the phone. We've just won 2 stars. And it was like deadly silence. Everyone's like, what the fuck? Is this true, chef? Is someone winding us up? And I phoned my old pastry chef, Elwin, and he was working for Tom Aikens at the time. Because I was like, really? Does this really happen? They've never phoned me like this before. So I phoned him up and he said, well, Tom Aikens reckons it's a hoax caller.
Oh, God.
Someone's bullshitting you. So I phoned the Michelin back up, got through to the office. Mr. Bulmer will ring you back. And that 5 minutes waiting for him to call was like the worst 5 minutes of my life. I was sitting there thinking to myself, was it Mr. Bulmer or was someone playing a joke? And in the back of your mind, you're like, someone's playing a joke, someone's playing a joke. And I phoned him up. I said, I'm really, really sorry, but the minute you told me we had 2 stars, I dropped the phone. And I said, and you got cut off. He said, oh, Daniel, he said, that's probably one of the worst reactions I've had to giving someone 2 Michelin stars. I said, look, I was really honest with him. I said, look, I phoned someone and they just said to me, it's a hoax. I said, Daniel, let me tell you, it's not a hoax. So I went back into the kitchen, told everyone, and I can't express to you that, you spent 2 years trying to keep 1 star to be promoted to 2 stars, and you're like 30 years old and you're standing there thinking to yourself, all your dreams. Actually, I'd never dreamed of 2 stars. I'd never dreamt of it. I never thought I was going to be good enough.
Yeah.
My goal was to achieve a Michelin star. That's what I'd set out for, to get 2 stars. And then, so by this point, it's Wednesday morning. You know the news, but you're not allowed to say anything. The news is coming out on Friday. The rumours going round I remember Le Manoir was meant to be getting 3 stars. No, and this is a little restaurant outside in the country, and no one had really heard of Midsummer House. There's loads of 1 stars out there now, isn't there? 1 stars are everywhere. Every city's got a 1 star, which is amazing. But no one had really seen what was going on. We'd been this like small snail just like pottering on, and suddenly you get an influx of all the best chefs in the country and the world starting to eat in your restaurant. Yeah. And you've got 5 boys in your kitchen and you're killing them trying to keep this standard, and you've come back from Christmas and you've completely changed the menu, and you've only been open like 2 days, and the staff aren't on form. They're not doing the dishes how you want. Right, okay, scrap this. Back to the menu that we won 2 stars with. We're going to stick to these dishes. Scrap all that. This is what we're doing. And the rest is history now. It's 20 years of 2 stars. And do you know something? That was on that day. I stood down the garden, and if anyone comes to Midsummer, they know that you go down the garden, and there is a fence, and I drilled a hole. Because I smoke, and it's one of the things I do I shouldn't be doing. But I stand there and have a cigarette, and I used to have a peephole in through to the restaurant. And I remember standing down the night that we got 2 stars, and I remember looking through that hole, thinking to myself, everything now, Daniel, needs to be better than it was.
Right, so it's
and
still
now
not
the
stopping.
pressure has just got 10 times worse. Again. And I reckon it took me probably 15 years to believe that we're a 2-star restaurant.
Really?
Yeah.
That long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, do you know something? That self-doubt has always been something that's a big part of it. And yeah, you'd stand there and you'd say to yourself, 2 stars, Daniel, 2 stars, Daniel, 2 stars, Daniel. Because you vision all these 2s. Like the restaurant I worked in France was a 2-star. Are we really like that? Are we really that good? Are we that consistent?
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly we are. 20 years of it. And I said to myself on the day I looked through that hole, I said to myself, whatever happens, you have to keep 2 stars for 20 years. I don't even know why it came into my head. I don't know. And I've said it to my wife. I've said it to everyone. My goal was always to keep it for 20 years. And you know something? This year at the Michelin Awards, I stood there and it happened, and it still feels like yesterday.
Right.
I don't feel like I've had 2 stars for 20 years.
Really?
I feel like I'm still fighting to keep it. But I believe that we are good enough now, and I believe, you can see it by the ability in the kitchen. The people that are coming to work for you have worked for your heroes, and they respect you in the same way, but you never let that's not a thought process that ever goes into your head. You're always thinking, no, I need to up my game. And I think that's probably why we're still here, and that's probably why we're still developing, and because that fear of not being good enough is still there secretly.
Yeah. But that's probably, again, kind of the ego thing is not there. So it's kind of, maybe you've still got this little bit of imposter syndrome that keeps you healthy.
There was an interesting situation that happened about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, that I had this gentleman that was writing a paper. He was doing a master's, and he was doing it on Michelin-starred chefs. And he'd interviewed everyone. He'd sent emails and interviewed everyone. There was 2 people in the country that he didn't get, and one was me, and I think the other one was Claude. And Sat phoned me and said, Daniel, this guy really wants to interview, and I've told him if there's anyone that should be included on this list, it should be you. I said, Sat, I ain't got time for this, mate. What do I get out of this? Daniel, it's really interesting. Sit down and give the guy half an hour. So he came in to see me. Long-haired guy, had worked for a national paper, really, really intelligent, quite far up, decided that he wanted to go and retrain, and he was doing this paper on Michelin-starred chefs. So we sat down. It was meant to be a half an hour meeting. It ended up being 9.5 hours.
Bloody hell.
And it was like going to therapy.
Right.
And he asked me a question he said, Daniel, what really annoys you? And I said, do you want the truth? He said, yeah. I said, I walk in the morning and I said, litter. I said, because of where we are, I said, I don't understand to this day why my staff walk past the litter as they're walking into the business. And I was so hooked on this. It really did aggravate me. Every morning I'd walk in, there'd be a crisp packet. It's not from my staff, but it's from people walking along the common and just throwing it.
It's just out the front.
But why aren't they picking it up? And he turned around at me and he said to me afterwards, he said, Daniel, he said, if everyone was you, you wouldn't have a business. He said, your job is to see things that no one else sees. They're too scared and they're too worried about what they've got to do in the day to get set so you're not unhappy. So you need to let that go. And it was that conversation we talked about so much that I think, I've always thought, before that, I always thought therapy was for nutcases. But actually, I think it's probably one of the healthiest things to do is to talk to someone in some ways about yourself, because it makes you come out of yourself and it makes you realize what your issues are. Because if you're your staff are not scared of you, but you're the boss, so they're going to respect you. They're never going to tell you what they really think. They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
And this is the truth. And it's hard to get people to actually tell you the truth. And only real friends will tell you the truth. If I phone up Sat Baines or Claude, they will tell me black and white, Daniel, you're being a dick. Okay, I'm being a dick. Yeah, okay, point taken. But
was that your impression of Claude there?
Yeah, 100%. And he will tell me I'm a dick.
Yeah.
But I think it's a beautiful place to be, but it's also, the pressure is on your shoulders, but you've got to learn how to control that.
Yeah. I'm very conscious of time. Are you
Don't
okay?
worry, we got all day.
Oh, you're right. That's fine. 9 hours.
No, probably not 9.
No, not 9 hours. I haven't got 9 hours. My bladder definitely won't last. Yeah, because there's a couple of things in your journey specifically. And actually what I wanted to tell you was my relationship with you as a consumer.
Yeah.
Because we lived down the road in Stansted.
Yep.
When I first came back to the UK, I spent 5.5 years at sea with P&O Cruises. So when I came to London, I really knew nothing about what was going on in the food scene in the UK. And so,
did you work on the boats?
Yeah.
It's funny, because remember I said about Justin?
Yeah.
My first manager. So he'd worked on the boats, and I'd never worked with anyone that had worked on a cruise line.
Right.
And
it's the best job in the world early 20s.
Oh, Justin was service was so important to him, because you work for your tips. Justin had got himself all the way up to restaurant manager on a Caribbean cruise. I can't remember what it was. But I'd never realised it. But he taught me so much. He taught me how to look after customers. He taught me what the difference is. He taught me that the customer's not always right, but you need to deal with these customers. And do you know, he still walks past the restaurant. He still comes in. He
picks up the litter.
No, he doesn't do that. But do you know, that's the thing about this industry, is you get friends for life. So go on, tell me about you.
Yeah, so effectively working on a ship means that you're on the moon. So you don't know what's going on in the world, really. You're just, it's a 7-day-a-week operation. You work 7 days a week. You work 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And you do it because actually there's nowhere else to go anyway. But it's actually a lot of fun. It was a really, really great place to start a career. But you don't know what's going on in the world. So when I first came back to the UK, I'd only probably really discovered that I was a foodie 2-3 years before that. Before that, I was steak and chips, and we were traveling the world, and I'd go to a restaurant in the Caribbean and order steak and chips, you know, and it was like, one day I woke up and went, what are you doing? You fool.
Yep.
And I arrived into the UK pretty much as Great British Menu became a thing.
Yep.
And the year that you were on it, I remember thinking, you created a net out of potatoes.
That's right.
And I just remember having my mind blown that how did you do that? Like, how did you come up with it in the first place?
Do you want the truth?
Go on.
So we needed a fish course.
Yeah.
Back in them days of the Great British Menu, it was all about your region. And
that's right, yeah.
And it got to about 3:00 in the afternoon. I had one of the dishes down pat. I wanted to bring the red nose into the dish because it was comic relief. And I thought to myself, lobster buoys. So if you see a lobster basket in a sea, it's got a buoy pointing where it is. And I thought to myself,
which is red.
That will be my nose. That's where I'll introduce this. So I said to myself, right, okay, where's the nearest place? What I wanted to dress it on a ship's number. You know, every boat has a number on the side, even the small ones. So me and one of the shift parties jumped in the car and we drove all the way to Malden because I wanted to get, sometimes you see these boats that have been shipwrecked up or they've been just left to deteriorate. And I thought to myself, I'll go and rob one now. I'll just go down there. One of these boats that have got a hole in it, I'll just cut that number out and I'll use that and I'll get my dad to make me some templates. Drove all the way down there, walked along the beach, thought to myself, the idea is amazing, but the concept hadn't come in yet. And then came back and spent days thinking about it, saying to me, it's got to be caged. The dish has got to be caged because it's coming from the sea, and that's where it's all down to that buoy. And that's where the creative process came in, but you're so focused on that. And it's funny because then you become a judge. And when you're judging it, you're looking at it a very different way. And I've always said to anyone that's contacted me to help, like, Daniel, could you give me some tips how to do it? And I always say, if you've got an idea, exhaust that idea, but make sure that idea is going to give you a story for that plate of food, because if it doesn't give you a story, you're bullshitting a story and you're not going to get through. And I learned the hard way because I did 2 years where I didn't win, and I didn't win because I put dishes from the restaurant on, and I thought, Daniel Clifford, 2 Michelin stars, I'll smash the arse out of this. And you're getting smashed by lads that didn't even have Michelin stars because they understand the brief, and you've sort of like thought, a good chef, I'll get past the brief. But it was not until you understand the brief. And the best thing I ever did with the Great British Menu is send the brief to 5 people that aren't in the industry.
Interesting, right?
And get their feedback.
Yeah.
Because if it's anyone in the industry, they read it a certain way. Someone who's not in the industry doesn't have a clue about what food you do, but they tell you what they're looking for, what's the highlights. So if it is comic relief, it needs to be around comic relief. So yeah, that's where the net came from. But the net, it's as I said to you, memory is really important, and you have stepped. There was a point in my life where I realised that net attachment was on that machine, but every time you did it, it was like, what am I ever going to use that for? Yeah, there's no reason to have that. Why have they even made that? And then suddenly, you pull it out and you're like, yes, that's it, job done.
Yeah. And on the back of that, because at this point in my life, I didn't know who's who in the food scene. You know places, but you don't know the people behind it. And because we're just living down the road, my wife and I, we're both January birthdays. Yeah. So we hate the fact that all you guys shut in January. Yeah, especially because I'm the 5th of January, so it's very early on. Terrible. Yeah, it's a shocking day to have a birthday. But we booked for our joint birthdays, because she's only a few days after. And hands down, one of the greatest food experiences that I've ever had.
Well, it's amazing.
And that was, 7, 8 years, 9 years ago, something like that. And so for you to... I'm kind of in awe of the ability to remain consistent for that length of time. I think that's the thing for me that definitely as I get older, I'm learning that consistency is your best friend. Yep. Like, just turn up consistently You're going to have bad days. You're going to have the ones that just don't quite go according to plan.
It's interesting what you said, because we had our weekly meeting before you turned up this morning, and Liam, that we talked about earlier, turned around to me and said, "Chef," he said, "whatever I've taken from Midsummer House," and he honestly said this. He said, "Chef, I've worked in other restaurants after I left you." He said, "I always go back to Midsummer House, is that you do not change anything. You don't give people VIP treatment. Some 3-stars you'll go to and you'll get extra canapes, you'll get extra this because of who you are. Right. We don't do that. This is what we do. We are consistent in what we do. We don't serve anything that's not good enough. We look at every dish every day and say to ourselves, is that good enough? Is that good enough? We tweak it if we need to tweak it. But 9 times out of 10, them recipes and them dishes are so well thought out that they don't need tweaking. They only get tweaked when the ingredients changed. But as he said to me, "Chef, consistency is key to Midsummer House." Yeah. And I think that is the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. You've dabbled in other businesses as well.
Yeah.
And again, one just around the corner from where we are, the Fletcher Bacon. Yeah. When we heard that you were coming to our part of the world, I was made up that we were going to get.
Yeah. What? Do you know? I lived round the corner then.
Did you really? Right.
So I lived in a village called Little Dunmow.
Yep.
And that's where the Flitch is. And I used to walk my dog past the Flitch quite regularly. And I always said to myself, "There's nothing in this area. There's nothing." A bit like Cambridge, really.
Completely agree.
And what I realised opening that, and I did open one prior to that. I opened one called the Headley, and that was back probably 2006, and it was a massive adventure, put lots of money into it. Should have learnt the hard way, but didn't. Brought a chef in, didn't quite work out, ran it for a few years, didn't make any money, place was hemorrhaging money, didn't realise. But then when I opened the Flitch, we were at a point here where I had 2 senior sous chefs in the kitchen, and we were like so strong, and it felt like we could take on the world. And stupidly, I thought I could stretch it to something else, and I thought I could take the sous chef here, put him there, and we would have 2 businesses operating in the same way.
I mean, that makes sense. I get your thinking.
Yeah, 100% makes sense. But the end of the day is what you suddenly realise. The minute you spent £1.8 million on doing the Fletcher Bacon up and realising you've bought something that's a listed building, and you realise that actually there's a lot more to do there than you originally thought there was going to be there, and the bank starts to step in and you're putting more and more money into it, and you're starting to realise it's not until it's open, it's running, everything's going well, but then problems start happening, and you wake up every morning and it's like, you look at your phone, and it's which problem is the biggest?
Right.
And you're asking yourself the question, do I head to Essex or do I head to Cambridgeshire? Which is the place that's... And I spent 6 months, and I didn't come to Midsummer for 6 months.
Right.
And I was getting more and more depressed. I was getting more and more anxious. I was getting more and more stressed. The Flitch was definitely taking off. Suddenly I felt like I was the chef at the Fletcher Bacon. I didn't feel like I was the chef at Midsummer. I had Mark here then, who I knew was strong as an ox, but Midsummer was ticking by, but it wasn't. It wasn't moving forward. It was just standing where it was. It was strong. I knew it was strong, but the Flitch was impacting on this, in my mind, too much, and I could never see a way out of it. I could never see that. I felt so responsible for it. And now I've realised that, do you know something? I don't need to do another business. Mm. Another business is just another load of headaches.
Yeah.
You do it because you think, originally the Flitch was meant to be helping finance this, to get this to 3 stars, but this ended up paying for the Flitch, and any profits I was making here was going into the Fletcher Bacon, and that meant the forward thinking of Midsummer House was being diluted, and that really upset me. And to be totally honest with you, you can't be in 2 places at once.
Yeah.
And you're relying on human beings, and do you know something? Human beings let you down because they're not as passionate as you. And you know, it's a real shame, but the end of the day is if I step away from this, the standard is going to be there, but it's not going to have the bits that it really. What I believe I bring to the party is I see things that no one else sees it, and that's probably because of my experience. That's probably because it's mine, and probably because I notice things that no one else notice.
Yeah.
And do you know something? That's probably, and my wife pointed it out in a meeting this morning. She said, Daniel, that's why Midsummer is where it is, because you don't let anything pass. You know, you're very black and white, and it's get that fixed or don't get it fixed. It's your decision. And you can't do that when you're spending more time in a car sorting out a kitchen problem, you know, driving up and down, washing up at the pub because they haven't got a kitchen porter. You've got to question the madness of it.
Yeah.
And the end of the day is it's a bit like that, what they say on the plane, isn't it? Got to save yourself first before you save others. And I wanted my mentality to be very focused. And to be honest with you, I prefer not to earn loads of cash, but I prefer to be happy in my own skin, because I walk out of here every night tremendously proud. I'm not very good at interacting with the guests. I don't do that. I don't walk around the dining room, you know, giving it large, thinking, you know, there's that fear again of being told that you're not good enough. You know, someone says, oh, you know, my steak, I don't know if I can hold back. I'm going to have to tell you you're a cunt. But, you know, there is. But I believe my experience and my knowledge now, I know that when we're sending something, I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of it within myself. And I don't want to die a multi-millionaire. I want to die happy.
Yeah, I mean, if ever there was a positive message to send out into the world, that is the one, because, you know, I don't think we've talked. I mean, happiness is obviously subjective to the individual, right? So I think that's what really we should all be trying to work towards is happiness.
Well, do you know
sounds
something?
very whimsical, but
I don't think you need hundreds of friends. I don't think you need hundreds of people patting you on the back. What you need is, my biggest support is my wife. 110%. She's there through the up and downs and the negatives, the pros and the cons. She picks me off the floor when I'm having a bad day. She definitely keeps me in my box when I need to be put back in my box. But she is my true supporter. And then I look at my friends. My friends are all chefs. None of my best friends are not chefs. They're people I've grown up with. They're all 2-star chefs. I have the best relationship with them. Some of them I don't speak to for 3 months, but when I see them, it's like I saw them yesterday.
Yeah.
And you know something? What more do I need?
Yeah.
I've got beautiful children. My children are all doing really well. Me and my wife watch our children every day, and we watch them develop into their own personalities. Their experiences excite us more than anything. And I still get turned on by going to restaurants and watching people eat food, drink wine. Like 2 years ago, between us, we got 7 children.
Right.
So you can imagine, if Midsummer's not enough, why the fuck would I need another restaurant when I've got 7 kids? I'll be honest with you. I've got enough things going on to keep myself, and this is where Daniel being grounded is so important. And I took my kids to a wine tasting in Portugal. We all know it. When we were 18, 19 years old, it was red or white wine. We didn't really understand the difference. And to watch their faces light up when they've had a tour of this beautiful vineyard, and then they're sitting in the vineyard owner's front room tasting their wines, and you can see the light bulbs going on in my children's heads. And I sat back and I thought to myself, Daniel, if there's one thing you can do, is just leave a legacy with your children. Just leave knowledge that they would never have got from anyone else apart from you. And that's the process I want to work on now. I just want people that have worked with me to go and do better than me. I want my kids to be educated in the world, like you said about the cruise, that steak in the Caribbean. If you could turn that time back, there's so many more things you'd have tasted. There's so many more things. And you know, your palate. This is the weird and wonderful thing about food. And this is, I grew up with my dad cooking me turkey burgers and chips, because he'd come home from work and it would be a dry turkey burger with some ketchup and some chips. And if anyone knows that 15-year-old Daniel, everyone would have said Daniel would never have been a chef because he hated food.
Right.
Because it would be a stew that my nan made, and it was so dry, and it'd be going around your mouth, and you'd be like, I can't eat that, giving it to the dog under the table quietly. And I think food has changed so much, and I think it's such an integral part of our life. A good sandwich is a really good sandwich. A good burger it's worth travelling for. We will leave Cambridge on a Monday afternoon, drive to central London to go and have chicken wings because they're the best chicken wings I know where to get them from. And do you know, that's a highlight of my week. It's not a 3-star restaurant where we're getting poured the best wine and the best food in the world. It's them one hits that last forever, and you're like, oh my God, I wish... Eating food that you wish you knew how to create.
Yeah.
That's the dream.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I mean, that strikes me as a wonderfully positive message to end on, but I'm not going to end it there.
Okay.
Because I have another question yet, which is about the book.
Yeah.
And I remember when you were doing socials around, I'm going to do a book.
Yeah.
And I think you even did a competition as to what should I call it.
Yeah.
I seem to remember that. And
Yeah.
I put something forward. I can't remember what it was. But I remember thinking, that's super witty, Phil.
Yeah.
But it was, I think it was like, it was something to do, it was a play on words with Midsummer and Other Seasons or something like that. Something. Anyway, I was a legend in my own brain.
Underpants.
Yes, indeed. And you called it Out of My Tree. And the one thing that I remember when I got the book, because obviously I was going to get the book, I'm a big fan.
Yep.
I should have brought it today, actually, could have got you to sign it. But there we are. Is how amazing your hair is on the front cover, by the way. It's immaculate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, how long did that take to
It
get
didn't
that
take
photo?
long. To be honest, if you knew if you knew the history of that whole book was done in a shed.
Really?
In a shed.
Right.
4 of us in a shed, 1 stainless steel table, and I'd cook the dishes, run the dishes down, dress the dishes. We did 4 photo shoots over 20 days, and I still see Tim. He still gets slightly nervous when he sees me, the photographer, because I was so precise in how I wanted the story to be told. And do you know something? Writing a book is... I'd always said I was going to do it.
Right. I was interested to understand, especially because when you said earlier on around the way that you learn and that you're not really a writer downer of things.
Do you know who did the recipes?
Go on.
My middle daughter, Faye. She came in nearly every night for about 2.5 months and sat down. We had 6 chefs sitting in the room we're in now, and they would all fire off the recipes that they'd learned, and that's how the book got done. Because I have an archive of recipes, but they're not ones I've written. They're ones that I've made, but someone else has written it down while I've made it, and then it's been transferred to a computer. But it's never been, oh, Daniel, I can't pull a book out and say, right, there's my recipes. I can tell you them. I can still tell you the creme anglaise recipe I learnt when I was 15. But that's because I've got a magical memory. But writing the book, I started it with the same photographer and the same publisher. They came in. They wanted to make it a home-style book. Let's make one that will go global, Daniel. And I was like, absolutely not. We started the photography, did 2 dishes in, and I asked them to leave. And I said, no, this is not what I want to do. Not happy with it. Don't feel comfortable with it. It took me another 6 months to actually get on board and say, right, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And I had to plan it so I was going to be happy with it. And do you know, I still pick it up now. And I picked it up on Saturday, actually, and I just had a quick flick through. And you do stand there and think to yourself, God, it's like an encyclopedia of your life, Daniel. It's got everything in it.
Yeah, but that was, I think, one of the things that I really loved about it. Not necessarily over other cookbooks, because I'm a collector of elite cookbooks. I love them. Because there's usually always a little bit of your story in there as well. But with your book, the layout with it, like you interlacing the story with the recipes, I thought was just genius, because you get a little window into your soul as to why this exists in the first place.
Because it's trying to understand how your brain works. I remember very clearly going to the cinema one evening, and I can't remember what film we were going to watch, but I remember I had nachos with tomato and chili. You know, the horrible ones you get at the cinema, and the nachos, it's got all the jalapenos and all of that. And whoever I went with had popcorn. And you taste something, and then, but you still got the jalapeno in your mouth, and you're like, my God, that works. That's really, really weird. Yeah? How can I make that work into a dessert? Suddenly we've got a popcorn parfait, we've got a chili twill, and it's all come from that experience. But tasting something and realising there's a light bulb gone on and you're like, oh my God, that works. And I think that's the beauty, is if you've got a great memory, you can remember how things taste.
Yeah.
So I can remember how basil tastes. I can remember it's still got that, it's got the sensation it leaves on your tongue after you've eaten it. It's like a slightly burning flavour, but it's got that basil, but it lingers. And then you think to yourself, what goes with that? And then you'll taste something else and you'll go, And if you can remember that, the minute something else, this is why travelling is so important, because when you taste something like jackfruit, or you go to Singapore and you taste durian fruit, or you go to, I'm super excited this year, we're going to the Caribbean, yeah, and I'll be telling you honest.
Good steaks in the Caribbean.
Yeah, well, apparently so. The chips aren't bad either.
Not bad at all.
No, but the thing is, I won't seek out the restaurants with the high accolades. I won't go to Sandy Lane and places like that. It's just not, do you know something? I don't want that type of experience. I want the experience of what the guy's doing in the food around the corner, of the local ingredients like plantain. I don't know anything about plantain. Yeah. What could I make with a plantain that's going to make something? Let's make, if we're going to cook it, let's cook it to an inch of its life and make it the best experience we can give our guests. I remember coming back from Singapore and I tasted jackfruit, and I spent months making a jackfruit sorbet, and we got it to absolutely perfection. It was beautiful. I remember tasting it again the next day and thinking to myself, it's jackfruit, isn't it? It's not really making me think, oh wow, it's like the most amazing thing. The consistency was perfect. Yeah, the taste was perfect. Did it hit the menu? No. It was another experiment. But maybe in 5 years' time, there'll be a different ingredient that comes into my life, and that will trigger, the jackfruit sorbet will come back, and it'll be like, yep, here we go, lovely, let's do that. And that's the beauty of my job is, do you know something? I reckon I could cook for another 100 years, and I'm only going to get better. I'm not going to get any worse, because every day is an experience. Every day we're learning that we can cook something else. We're learning that we can use pine. We're learning that acorns, I was told as a kid they're poisonous, but you can use them if you use them this way. It's understanding the path and the journey that we go on. And that's why it's so fascinating. And you still taste the wine every day, and it makes you excited. Not because it's got alcohol in it, because this is why I think pairing of food and wine, until you've had a pairing, so many restaurants you go to and they say, oh, would you like a pairing with that? And you have a pairing with all these courses. And I came to dinner here about 5 years ago, and it was the night before lockdown, and me and my wife came, and the first time I'd ever eaten at Midsummer House on a Saturday night, and it was literally the week before lockdown, and we sat in the middle of the restaurant, and the food kept on coming, like it does, and the wine pairings kept on coming, and I was sitting at this table, and suddenly I had 4 glasses in front of me of unfinished wine, because I hadn't finished that, so they hadn't taken it off the table. Next one, hadn't finished that one. And I got to the end of the meal, me and my wife went home, and I said, table's too small, too many glasses on the table, why didn't I finish them?
Right.
Because they weren't fucking good enough. Right. It's clearly they weren't good enough. And then we came again about 6 weeks ago, and had a bottle of champagne upstairs. We had some close friends. It was their 50th birthday, so I treated them. Sat upstairs, had a glass of champagne. I was in a great mood. I didn't even feel like I worked here. I felt like I felt like a customer. For the first time in 26 years, I felt like a customer. And then we went downstairs. Service started. Dish came out. Wine done. Wine done. Wine done. Got to the end of the meal. No glasses on the table. And I sat back and I said to the sommelier, I said, that is the best wine pairing I've ever had. Then wines that I tasted, I said, I'll be honest with you, probably 6 of them out of the 9, I could not have drunk a bottle of it. There's absolutely no way I could have drunk a bottle of it. And if you gave me that glass of wine with anything else, I would have thought that wine was disgusting. But I didn't leave here pissed. I didn't leave here feeling like shit. I came in the next day at 8 o'clock in the morning feeling absolutely amazing. but the wine was so perfectly balanced to the food that I felt like I'd had an amazing experience. And that is where the issue is we have bad experiences and it puts us off. It's a bit like food. If you have a bad oyster, you'll never eat oysters again. If someone cooks you a piece of fish when you're 12 years old and that piece of fish comes out and it smells like old fish, we all know what old fish smells like, it will put you off fish forever. And that happened to me. When I was 13, 14, I had fish and chips, thought it was disgusting. I didn't eat fish again until I was 21. I was sous chef in a 1-star at 19, cooking fish, but refused to eat it.
Wow.
And it took so much confidence. And if anyone knows me now, if I go out, because my days off are Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, what worst 3 days are you going to have in this industry to have your days off? Because if anyone knows anything about fishing and knows where the last day the fishermen go out is on a Thursday, because Friday it goes to market. There's no market on a Saturday. There's no market on a Sunday. The fishermen don't start going out till Monday. The fish is not landed till Tuesday. So you don't get fresh fish in the world till Wednesday, but then it cuts off on Friday. So you've got this window. So anyone who knows me, when I go out to eat, I won't eat fish on them days because I just look, well, you're eating old fish.
How interesting. There we are. See,
there you
this
go.
is turning into an educational podcast now as well. My God. No, that's awesome. And I had another question that just popped into my head, but it's completely gone again. I think I'm probably going to call it because I could probably talk to you all day, to be honest. One as a fanboy as well, but also I think what an amazing journey you've had from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
A roller coaster, without question.
Look, I'll be honest with you. When my wife calls it the interview, when we first met, we went to this pub. If you know my wife, you know that she's very elegant. She's beautiful, but she's got the kindest nature in the world. And you would not put us together. I am. If there's a brick wall, I'm going to go through it. Whatever happens, I'm going to go through it. The wall won't beat me. Her, she'll find a beautiful step and how to step over the wall, and the wall will be never touched, never disrespected, and that is the difference between us. We sat down in a pub when we first met, and she calls it the interview. I don't call it the interview. I call it getting to know each other. But I did turn around to her and I said, I promise you, I will love you forever, but our life will be a roller coaster. And I said a lot apparently in that initial meeting, but I would believe that if you asked her now, she would still tell you that our life is we have amazing highs and we have amazing lows, but I'll be honest with you, together, what we create is this balance that I feel privileged to have her, but I also feel stronger to be by her side. And I think, to be honest with you, that is now the focus of my life is, first of all, to be happy, but second of all is to try and get the roller coaster not to be a waltzer. I'd like it to be more like the teacups.
Very good. And that is, a wonderful way to wrap it up. And look, thank you so much for being so kind with your time today.
It's been absolutely beautiful. I've loved it. I'll be honest with you. As I said to you, things like this are like therapy to me. So it just means that I'm going to have a better day.
Nice. Well, that's great. That makes me feel good as well. So
brilliant.
Hospitality wins.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Dan.
That's a pleasure.
Cheers.